Gentleman from Colorado for questions.
Thank you. I thank the chairman. Thank you, Judge, for being here today and for your team. And I certainly have great respect for you and for the ranking member on your subcommittee, whom I know wished that she could be here. And she's spoken glowingly of you in terms of the work that you all have done together in the past. But we have a job to do here, which is ensuring that we review every bill that comes through the Rules Committee before it gets to the floor and that they're appropriately vetted. And so in that regard, I want to just ask a couple of quick questions about the bill that you've submitted to the committee on military construction. I know you agree with me, military construction is an incredibly important priority within this larger bill, right?
Absolutely.
And I read a report recently suggested 30% of our military infrastructure worldwide is in poor condition, which means
Probably correct.
probably correct. So funding military construction, incredibly important to the national security of our country. Last year, when House Democrats were in charge of the House, we allocated, ultimately was signed into law, $19 billion for the military construction piece of this bill. Does that sound about right?
I think you're right, but I'm not positive. I'll take your word for it.
I appreciate it, Judge. And this year, you have allocated $17.7 billion in the budget
right.
for military construction. Okay, so that's lower. That's a cut of $1.3 billion in military construction that your budget submits. Is that right?
Actually, we're following the, I don't like people sneaking up behind me.
That's all right. You were saying?
Yes, theoretically it is.
Well, I mean, I don't.
Funded more than the president asked for.
I guess I'm trying to understand. You're saying theoretically. Last year, the United States military had $19 billion to spend on military construction. This is for example, housing for our service members. This
right.
year, if your bill passes the House and passes the Senate and is signed into law, there will be $17.7 billion for military construction.
Correct.
So $1.3 billion less for military construction, service members' housing, by way of example, than the last year, right?
Right.
Okay. Military infrastructure backlog. I'm sure you agree with me, Judge, and you've been working on these issues a lot longer than I have. Large backlog for military infrastructure. According to the Department of Defense, about $100 billion. That seem about right?
Wouldn't know the number. It's large.
Okay.
Large.
Well, I can
Large
represent.
need.
I can represent to you. It's a big number.
Well,
President Biden made a request in his budget request that he submitted to Congress for a specific allocation to start addressing that backlog. He asked for $2 billion. How much did your subcommittee allocate for military infrastructure backlog to start chipping away at that? I can tell you, Judge, the answer is zero. There's no money in the budget proposal that you've submitted to us to start chipping away at that infrastructure backlog. President Biden asked for $2 billion. The subcommittee gave him zero.
okay, if you say that.
Okay, so military construction, $1.3 billion cut. Military infrastructure backlog, zeroed out, or zero in the request, or zero rather allocated. The BRAC account, base closure account, I know you're familiar with that.
I'm familiar with that very well.
Right, very much so, sir.
Been through two BRAC.
Yes, sir, I'm sure.
How many have you been through?
Yeah, yes, sir. One of the accounts in BRAC, as I understand it, is for PFAS, remediation and cleanup. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Last year, House Democrats allocated $200 million in dedicated resources for PFAS cleanup. How much does this budget proposal include for dedicated PFAS cleanup?
There is nothing in this bill that requires or prohibits the government, the departments from addressing PFAS with the funds that they have. The department does not support budgeting by chemical.
Sure. So and I understand, and I guess what I'm trying to get at, Judge, is there are differences, and I think you'd attest to this. There are differences between the budget you submitted to this committee and that your committee,
I can almost guarantee you.
from the budget that was passed last year, right? I mean, that's the
I
nature of
wouldn't
this. And
argue
so,
with Debbie or you or anybody else.
yes, sir. And all I'm
Our
trying
budget
to,
is more frugal than usual.
all I'm trying to do is glean, I think, for the American people and for members, the differences between the bill that you marked up in your committee and that we're going to consider and the bill that was passed last year. And I think we're in agreement here because you've given honest answers, and I appreciate that. I appreciate
I
your,
always give honest.
yes, sir. I appreciate your candor. Military construction, $1.3 billion cut. Military infrastructure backlog. President requests $2 billion. This budget gives him none. And PFAS remediation, last year, $200 million direct, dedicated funding stream to clean up PFAS at sites across our country. This year, zero.
To clarify one thing.
Yes, sir.
We are 1.5 billion below FY '23.
Yes, I understand. That's what
Right.
as I said.
But we're 800 million above the budget request.
Yeah, but the difference is, and this is my point, and again, this is why we're having this exchange, is the way in which you've allocated dollars are differently. They don't reflect, in my view, the president's priorities, which is why he has indicated that he would veto his deep concerns about this legislation. Again, it's not, you've made a judgment that there ought to be less money for military construction than was allocated last year when congressional Democrats were in charge. That's your prerogative.
No, I didn't make it that, I made a decision to spend it differently.
Sure, well, yeah, spend it differently, sure. So you took,
I'm looking at what's going on.
I hear you.
China,
I hear
and
you.
I'm beefing up the stuff in Hawaii, in Kwajalein, and in Guam.
Sure.
And that's very important.
I don't,
Those are fighting.
I don't disagree with you about the
Fighting
priorities.
platforms
But, sir, I think this
for our
is,
soldiers.
yeah, of course, and my point is we can do both. The only reason that you're not able to do both is because you have gone deeper than the original spending levels that had been negotiated with the President and Speaker McCarthy 3 months ago as part of the Fiscal Responsibility Act to avert the debt ceiling. So, I mean, we would like to do both, and you're only doing one. And, sir, I guess what I'm saying is you could say it's moving money around to a different priority. That's accurate. I'm just trying to give a sense to our colleagues about where the money is being moved from. And I think we're on the same page that military construction, housing for service members by way of example.
We've done something for them in this bill too.
I understand, but they're getting a cut of $1.3 billion versus what was allocated in the last budget. That's the math. I'm not making these
I've
numbers
actually
up.
in out there and started the fight to get it fixed up.
What was that?
I went out to start that fight on Fort Hood.
Yes, sir. I mean, the best way to do it, I think, would be to fund it at the level that we funded it at. Right? I mean, that's the easiest way to
Well,
solve
you
this
know
problem.
what?
I mean, look, Mr. Judge, the easiest way.
We have a reason we call ourselves Democrats and Republicans.
I hear you. I'm just saying the easiest way. I'll use PFAS again as an example.
Yes,
because,
I agree.
I mean, PFAS in Colorado, we've got 11 different places where these chemicals have been detected. We want them out of our state. We want that remediation to happen. Not next year, not 10 years from now, now. And the best way to do that, and by the way, there are members on this committee. I'm not the only member who has a military installation or a location within their district or their state where these substances have been detected. Shaw Air Force Base, I believe it. It's in South Carolina. Just recently, you have neighborhoods there who are using bottled water. I was just reading a news article about it, right? This bill does nothing to help them because at the end of the day, the PFAS remediation account, $200 million, dedicated funding that congressional Democrats fought for, has been zeroed out. And all I'm suggesting, Mr. Chair, is, because again, I know you to be an honorable man, and I know that you've worked with your ranking member in the past. And to our ranking member's point, and he articulated this in the beginning, this cannot be the way that I think you and me and others wanted this to end, with a partisan bill, a bill that gets marked out on a completely partisan vote a bill that is likely to be subject to a, again, completely partisan vote on the House floor, as opposed to something that could be developed in a bipartisan way. That's all I'm suggesting. And you don't have to answer that, but I think my sense is that you concur with me on that assessment. So in any event, we will fight for that $200 million, I should say, for PFAS remediation in the Senate. We'll do it. We'll fight for Shaw Air Force Base and the Colorado bases that are impacted, and every other base of a member on this committee, whether they vote for this bill, or excuse me, whether they vote against this bill, as I certainly intend to do, or not. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would yield back.